we have done about 11 or 10% of the golf swing. I will turn. In a good golf swing, the goal is always to try to turn to 90 degrees, get 90 degrees of rotation. I am trying to turn almost half of my rotation in the first 10% of the swing. What's going on, everybody? Scott, I'm coming at you. We are here in the studio and we are helping you build that fundamentally sound golf swing that you are looking for. If it's the off season or if you're just looking to do this and it's time to start getting a swing that you love, this is what's going to help you out. So before we jump into the takeaway, I'm gonna strongly encourage you, if you did not watch our grip video, go watch that. I will link it down below and in the cards above, because if you do not have a good grip, you need to start off with that, because that has a massive impact with what's going on in the rest of the swing. We're then gonna move into the takeaway, because as you've heard me say a lot of times on this channel, the golf swing is a sequence of events. We need to have the right sequence going on because it affects what's going on later on down the line. The goal of a very efficient golf swing is I will not have to make up for things later on in the swing. That is pretty much the goal. If you want to be a better player, a better ball striker, you do not want to have makeup moves in your golf swing. So we are going to work really hard on this takeaway, and we focus on it a lot, and we see professionals focus on it a lot because they know it gets the swing started, it gets the sequence going in the right order. Now, before we get into what you need to do, let's define what the takeaway is. Now, in a golf swing, if you're familiar with teaching vocabulary, we typically define the golf swing in what would be called the P positions or the P system. It basically means we have P1 all the way through to P9, or depending on who you talk to, some say P10. That just means you're adding an extra position for the finish. And all we're looking at is P1 would be the setup of the golf club, where you are at address before you even start swinging. As you move through, you go through the different positions. So if you ever hear somebody say, hey, I'm at P whatever, P4, P4 and a half, P6, those are just different spots along a golf swing. And if you're familiar with the system, you will know what it is. The P system for the takeaway is going to be very simple. It's P1 to 2. Now, 2 is when the golf club gets parallel to the ground. The shaft of the club is parallel to the ground. So our takeaway is only this far. We are talking about, if you go and do the math, 1 out of 9, I typically do the 9 system, 10 or 11% of the golf swing. That's an important number to think about as we go later on into what is going on with the swing. So we are only talking about getting the club started from the address to here. Now, again, that is really important because that has a massive impact of what's going to go on later on in the swing. So we're going to break this down into 2 parts. We're going to talk about body motion, and then we're going to talk about club motion. So the first part here, let's get into the body motion that we are looking for a great takeaway. So when we start talking about body motion, we're going to be talking about our torso, we're going to be talking about our pelvis. Those are 2 things that we use. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the ground with the pressure board. We'll get into that in just a second. But there are basically 3 movements that we need to know about in our golf swing. So if I was talking about my upper body, if I'm just standing straight up and down, the 3 that we talk about, we're talking about rotation, we're talking about tilting, and we're talking about extension, okay? Or if you flex forward, that's called flexion. Essentially what it is if I'm standing straight up and down, rotation is just rotating around your spine. Tilting is just tilting sideways of the spine. Flexion is forward bending, backwards bending of the spine. All 3 of those moves are going to be present in a golf swing. We can do the same thing with our pelvis. We tilt, we rotate, we can extend or flex as we go through in the pelvis, all right? So as we go through this, all right, we do want to look at how we want to move those 3 areas. So if I have a golf swing, when we have a good takeaway, the first thing that I like to see, we like to see the golf club moving back with our club and our body together. I like to see things get started together. Too many times people try to get the golf club started and they move the club too fast. They move their arms too fast and they get out of sequence and out of sync with their body right from the get-go. Again, if that happens, you will then be playing catch-up right off the start of your golf swing. So what I like to see is I want to see my body start to turn. I want to see my body start to tilt down towards the golf ball. And at this point in the swing, I don't really like to see any excessive extension. I don't like to see flexion where I'm just kind of, we call it kind of the old man swing. You know, you see some of these really old golfers of the past, they swing it back. The Mr. Haverkamps from Caddyshack, right?
Oh, Charlie, I'm hot today.
You swing it back, they're kind of bent over in this kind of weird posture as they go back. They're flexed too far forward. That's going to be a hard position to come back from if that's where you get to. So we want to see that flexion extension part. We just want to feel like we're still straight up and down essentially as we go. Now, as far as getting these moves to happen, here's how I like to see things happen. If we're going back from the address to P2, the takeaway, how much of each one of those should you want? Well, I want, as far as rotation, I need to have approximately 40 to 45 degrees of rotation. That is the goal that you want to have in your upper body by the time the club gets to here. So I want you to think about that. That's important. We have done about 11 or 10% of the golf swing. I will turn. In a good golf swing, the goal is always to try to turn to 90 degrees, get 90 degrees of rotation. I am trying to turn almost half of my rotation in the first 10% of the swing. That is a massive amount. People don't realize how much you need to start turning right off the golf ball. You need to get your motion started. Also, when you are going through this motion, the tilting. So I've turned about 45. I want to be tilting approximately 20 to 30 degrees down towards the golf ball at this point. As I continue back, I'm going to be at around 30, you can be say 30 to 40 degrees of angle down to the golf ball. If you're crazy, you might see some people with 45 tilting down. That takes some crazy flexibility to do that, but there are people that have done that. It's just one of those things where we need to be moving this body and tilting it as much as we can. And if we do that, if we can get the rotation, we can get the tilts, we're going to be in a really good shape. You also are going to see that with the pelvis. Our pelvis ultimately is going to rotate around 45 degrees. If you're less flexible, it actually should rotate a little bit more. It could get even up to like 60 degrees of rotation. Same movements, just turning back as you go. Our pelvis is also going to tilt. We're going to see something on the lines of, you know, it can be really anywhere from 10 even up to like 20 degrees of pelvis tilt. It's definitely not as much as what you see in the upper body, but it actually could be more too. Again, that one kind of depends on who the player is, but we definitely need to see some sort of tilt to that pelvis as we are going back. We want to be tilting it down towards the golf ball. So same thing, turn and tilt as you go. That is what we are looking for. Now, as far as flexion and extension goes, I don't necessarily have people worry too much about that right now, because if you do the other two moves, if you worry about the other two things, you tend to get things dialed in. So how I like to see people work on this is we actually get the pressure board out. So people will say, okay, hey, Scott, yeah, you're saying in the takeaway, I need to be able to get this club moving and I need to get my body moving. Well, yes, but what people do is they just think about moving their body. They're like, all right, I'm going to rotate. I'm going to tilt. And what you're going to see here is I'm actually leaning on my front foot as I do that. I'm not getting any pressure shift in the swing. As we take the golf club away, what you're going to realize is pressure shift. This is something that's fairly new to golf within, I'd say, the last 20 years, with force plates coming more and more prevalent in the golf world. But what we realize is that if you watch the best ball strikers, two that come to mind, Rory, Brooks Koepka, very, very good ball strikers. What you actually see as they go is they actually get this little pressure into their trail foot that kicks off their golf swing. It's basically like the gas pedal to their golf swing. And what that does is they push into the ground pushes back. And what happens is that ground is pushing back and it's going along the side of their body. So what that does is that creates a torque. That is what helps my body to start rotating. Again, people are really afraid, especially people that are afraid of like swaying, things like that. There is a tiny bit of swaying in the golf swing. You need to be swaying and moving a little bit laterally through your swing. But people get so afraid of that that they just stay still. All right, I'm only gonna move my body. And then what they end up doing is they're turning, they're tilting. They can't turn as much as they want. Their tilt's usually okay, but then what they start getting is this extension where they're actually leaning backwards towards the target. Now, when I go to hit it, I'm going to fall back because I need to rebalance as I go. What I want to see is this pressure shift that gets the body to start turning, and then I can tilt it as I go. If I do that, I'm going to get in a much better spot. So if I do that with a golf club, here's what that's going to look like. All right, I'm in my setup. Typically on an iron, I'm about 60-40 on my front foot. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to essentially just hit the gas and turn, okay? Hit the gas, turn, okay? Gas and turn, there we go. All of a sudden, we're in really good shape there. I'm starting to get my body to turn and I'm still tilting down to the golf ball as we go. We're really going to be in a good spot body-wise as I'm going through. And for me, being a bigger guy, I don't necessarily get all the way to 90 degrees at the top all the time. I'm usually in the mid-80s. So I try to really force myself to get as much turn as I can on that takeaway. So I will really exaggerate it as we go. Now let's get into what the club is going to do. And when I say the club, that typically is going to mean your arms as we go. So the arms in the golf swing, there are a couple of things that people really struggle with on the takeaway. So a lot of people are really afraid, or they're really cognizant of the idea that, hey, I need to swing from the inside, so I need to get the club back. There's these ideas that we need to get depth in our golf swing. So depth being, as I get to the top of my swing, having the club more behind me, that is depth. The problem with that is you have to get depth the right way. And if you don't, it's okay not to have the most amount of depth in your golf swing. I'd rather have people have good fundamentals than try to get some arbitrary positions. The reason this becomes a problem is because what people will do trying to get that depth, what they'll do is they'll just yank their arms back and they yank their arms across their body. And we've talked about this in the past. If you do that, the only place my arms can go from here is back out, which then creates that over the top move. You basically lost the ability to shallow the club out, or whatever you want to call it, as you're going through the swing. You no longer are able to do that. So as far as the club with our hands and arms, here's what I like to see. So if we're here on the camera, and this is where we'll get over this so you can really see it. If I have the camera in a good spot, right down the line, it's right in line with my hands. If I turn back properly, this club, you're going to see the club here at this P2 position. See how the club is pretty much in line with my hands? If I'm drawing, if my camera's a little lower, you would actually see the club covering my hands. That is a great kind of reference point that I like to see as we go. That means that we're getting the club in a good spot. You can have the club a little bit off that. We see some players have it just inside. We'll see some players have it way outside. But what we typically don't see, I don't see a lot of players that are really good getting that club way in here, because again, you've restricted where you can go with the club as you're coming back in. A lot of times you're going to have to go back this way. So I like to see that club covering the hands. Now, how do we do that? How do we avoid getting that club to come in a little bit too far? Well, we're going to bring out the 3D plane here, the alpha, beta, gamma plane. If you're not familiar with Jacobs 3D, Brian Manzella, they are awesome guys. I love learning from them. They help my teaching out a lot. Highly recommend them if you go follow them on Twitter, all that stuff. So what we're looking for here, the plane is just for reference. It's just to give us an idea, so it's a little easier to tell what's going on. That's really all this is. When I'm swinging here, if I bring the club and just suck the club inside, you're going to see the plane is way off base here. So all I need to do is work on getting the club and the plane as level as we can and making sure my plane is nice and straight here. So something like that, right? I just want to get the club level. Now the key here is I still have to turn and tilt. Turn and tilt while I get that plane level. Now if you find that the club is getting too far inside, all that means is we are not getting the club to go up enough. So essentially all I need to do is I need to feel like my hands and arms are lifting up in front of me a little more. So as I go back, I'm going to feel like I'm lifting the club like this as we go. Now that club is in a much better spot. And there we go. The arm swing at this point in the swing is fairly simple, although it's really important to check your positions to see where you are at. It's a matter of, are you letting your arms swing the club up, lift the club up, or are you pulling them inside too much? Now, one little note, I don't want to see the club way out here like this. If you're somebody that pulls it way inside, and as you're learning this at first, you see it go outside a little bit, that's okay. That's fine. I'd rather see somebody too outside than too in. All that means is as you're going back, you just need to blend that body turn and that pivot a little bit better, but that will come over time as you practice it. So that's all that really means, and that's something that'll get yourself, sorted out as you go on further on in this. And then one final note, club face. Where do we like the club face as we take it away? So this is going to depend on who you are and what your ball flight is. So I am somebody that tries to draw the golf ball. I like to see the ball start a little bit right. You can actually see the flight of this shot up here on screen. That's pretty good flight for me. Starts just right at target, drawing back. So that means that the face has to be a little bit open. That means I need the face a little more open so it can start a little right. When I get in trouble, I shut the face a little bit too much. That's something I don't want to do. If you were a fader, a la Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Dustin Johnson, you could actually have that face a little bit more closed. That would help you. So what I like to see is, I like to go back, pivot, and see that I try to get the toe of the club straight up as we go. That also the plane wings nice and level. If you're somebody that struggles with a slice, you can feel that toe be a little bit more in, so the plane wings down a touch. And if you're trying to hit like a power fade, you could bow this lead wrist a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of it, but you could do it, and that face would be even more closed. Essentially, the only thing you really don't want to do as you're taking it back is I don't want to roll this club face open so it's up at the sky. If you are doing that, you first want to check your grip, and then second, you're going to want to just look at how you're maneuvering that club on the way back. That's essentially where that's going to come from. And again, it starts the sequence off poorly. You're going to work through the swing, and you're just playing catch up. That face is rolled way open, and now I have to do stuff to make up for it, and we just don't want that. So again, I like it just toe up. Again, for me being a drawer where I'm going to start it more out to the right, I can have it just a touch more open. If you are not trying to do that, or you're coming from a slice and you really want to get that face closed, I would recommend getting that face just ticked in just a little bit. You don't have to crazy do it, but just a little bit as you go, and that will be it, all right? So that is how those arms are going to control the club face as we take this away. Now, let's give you a drill that you can do to take it away. There's a lot of drills for the takeaway out there. There's drills like roll the golf ball back, stuff like that. Honestly, my favorite drill when we are working on takeaway is just the simplest of drills, and you can do this at any time. I obviously like aids like a gravity fit. That's a good one. That's going to really help you. But what we're looking for is I'm going to take the club here, and I'm going to put the club in my belly button. So you can see it's in my belly button, and I'm going to grip down whatever feels like a comfortable distance. We are not going to hit the ball here, so you are going to be on the steel of the golf club. And then I'm going to get into my posture, and I'm just going to make takeaways where I keep the butt end of the grip in my belly button. And I'm going to move my body and you're gonna get a good feel of moving your body, and you're gonna see where you want the golf club to be as you're going back. Then as I go to a full length grip, let's turn it back, trying to get that club back to the same spot, and then you can then go ahead and hit a golf ball working at that takeaway. I'd be interested to see how people do with the takeaway, seeing how it works for their swing overall, but I think it can be a really, really big help in getting things to work more properly and with more power as you go through, and with more ease as you're hitting the ball. So that is the takeaway. If you have any questions about it, again, there's a lot going on, so please ask those questions down below. We have a series going on. We'll be continuing how to basically build the golf swing. What are we looking for? What are the numbers? What does the science say that a golf swing should be? We will be continuing that on, so click that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already. Check out that grip video if you haven't, and we will see you in the next one, everybody. Thanks for watching. Peace.